Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Patience Modevi, and she is a mindset coach for teens, which
That's
is
right.
great. But you're going to have to get ready for it because her and I agree on something, which is that we want to see the adults doing their own work so they don't pass their trauma on to their kids. How are you, Patience?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be here with you. Such a
Well,
great
I
topic
am.
to talk
It,
about.
such a great topic. And why is this topic important to you?
I think it's important to me mainly because of what I do, the work I do with young people and what I see day in, day out, but also past experiences I've been through and what I've seen around me happening.
Absolutely. So, can you describe the difference in a teen whose parents try to do their own work and break the cycle versus a teen whose parents are just kind of thinking, well, I know my teen's having trouble, but I want them to do their own work. I don't want to have to do any work. Can you describe the difference of those two teens?
Okay, so the teens where the parent has done some work in general, the parent is really pushing the young person to also understand themselves and understand what's happening around them, their environment, and people they are around. In terms of the difference with teens where they haven't been, where the parents is kind of leaving them to do the work, there's kind of like a lot of denials from the
Mm,
parents. And therefore, the young person is taken as a victim. I wouldn't say the young person is kind of blamed for what they're doing. So it's their own fault as to why they are doing such and such, opposed to, well, what is it that I passed on, or what is it that I didn't maybe support enough, my teen around? What is happening that is going in circle? What's happened before that keeps happening? And then just having this kind of like victimized approach, I would say.
I agree completely, and such a good language around that. And it's really hard because there's a both and conversation, a balance of like maybe these kids were, or maybe the parents even were victims of something, but then having a victim mindset prevents the personal responsibility and self growth to happen, even if the original trauma wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
There has to be a step where you take that self responsibility and model it for your kids. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking. So, if I was to give an example of a young person I work with, where the mother was going through a circle where she wasn't happy within her own marriage, therefore there were certain behaviors that were being shown, and once the young person, she wasn't finding the love she was looking for in the family unit, she went to look for it outside.
Mm.
But in a way that wasn't maybe the healthier way, if I can say it like that. And the parent automatically um, say that the young person was bad, they were having a bad behavior. There was all of this accusation and how can you do this, and not saying that somewhere something had been passed on or something maybe hadn't been taught to this young person. I think sometimes parents assumed, so you have to do the right thing, so I show you the right thing, so therefore you will always do the right thing. Well, we are all human and we all make mistakes. That's one. They made mistakes, but they're not acknowledging the mistakes maybe they've done. Therefore, how can they accept whatever the young person is going through, their teenagers is going through? And this is horrible, because what happens then is that it brings another layer of trauma onto the young
Right.
person. So the young person has gone through a certain situation, they're already feeling like, oh my gosh, this has happened to me. They don't have the time to deal with that. And boom, there's another layer that is pushed onto it.
So how can parents help their teens?
I feel so obviously with everything is communication, but it's when I'm saying communication, it's not just talking about random things that happen, but really explaining where you come from, to your kids. Like, don't be afraid to say what's been happening, because in that, I think there's like recovery, if I can say it in that sense. Um, and also is making them understand that I've gone through this. It doesn't mean you're going to go through this, but I'm just showing you that this is something that's happened, and this is the repercussion of what happened to in my life. And this is
So
where,
teaching them
yeah,
consequences from choices, or kind of connecting the
but
dots for
yeah,
teens. Does that feel right?
yes, because when you think about it, like, I don't know where or you were when you were a teenager, Sarah, but I was kind of like naive. For me, it was like everyone was amazing and everyone was,
No, that's exactly what I
yes,
was. Yes, that's exactly who I was.
everyone was amazing. And, that I couldn't see the bad where people were like, oh, no, 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 this is happening. And then something would happen and I'd be like, oh, why is this happening? Did I do something wrong? I never thought of it could have been the other person. I always thought it was me because I had been taught about being this good girl and being the girl that does things right. And, you don't talk a certain way and all of those kind of things that we grow up with. But at the end of the day, they're just artificial around. And that's not the real truth of what happens in the real life. And I think it's just being true. And young people, I'm going to say young people, teens are not dolls that you have to take in a fragile way and not talk to about. You need to be able to tell them the real truth of things that is happening around,
Mm.
even inside the house, I would say.
I really like that because, fast forward 50 years ago, we'll go there. There was such a like belief of denial and pretending what was happening in the house wasn't happening, and creating a cognitive dissonance for kids where
Yes,
they, okay, well, I see that dad's always drunk, or I see that mom is so depressed she never leaves the bed, but everyone's telling me everything's fine. Doesn't seem like everything's fine,
I, yeah,
but my parents are telling me everything's fine, so can I believe my parents? Or, and it was like, well, a good child, doesn't tell people what's happening
yeah,
in their home, or pretends to overlook the affair, or pretends to whatever. And so most of the people listening to this, even if they weren't raised that way, their parents probably were.
well,
So we're very close in that generational gap. Does that feel true for you?
yes, it feels true. It
Mm-hmm.
absolutely feels true. And I think another thing is that when you add the cultural aspect, when you add
Mm-hmm.
religious aspect to it, that brings another layer of like, shush, like, don't talk about this, so
Yes.
we can't do this. So there's more barriers put in. And that again makes the child isolate and feel like, well, I must be the only one thinking like this.
Yes, we're the only one
Yeah.
living this way, or the only one experiencing this. Yeah, great point. So you talked about communication, right? And being a good communicator, and talking to your kids. I like to say, what do your eyes see? What do your ears hear with teens and young people? I like to
Yes, completely.
bring that like aspect of denial and bring up the elephant in the room.
Completely.
If Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Do you agree? Do
Yes,
you? Mhm.
completely. I'm really big on being a role model.
Right.
So, and this is where I'm saying the parents need to do the work with
Mhm.
themselves in order to support their young people or support teenagers. Because once you're modeling, like for example, for me, this example, so basically, when I was a kid, I think I was like maybe 8 or 9, something happened in the family, and I was like, but I'm really sensitive. And everybody started laughing. Like, being sensitive, and the fact of like something was maybe hurting me, or maybe I felt in some certain way, and everybody was laughing. I thought, why are they laughing? So they kind of like dismissed what I was feeling. And anybody at the time, I remember, so my dad was like proper old school, but I remember at the time, anybody that was going counseling, or if you were going to see a psychologist or someone like that, automatically something was wrong with you. And I don't believe that. I think actually you're healthier by doing that. See, when you go to the GP, so you've got a cough or a flu, you go to the GP, nobody says something wrong with you. But here you go, maybe you're not feeling at your full self, or you're feeling slightly depressed, and boom, there's this whole stigma of like, oh, they've gone there, so something's wrong with them. And I think this, and I'm really talking about my experience here, but when I look at people around me, a lot of this happened, and up until now, there's this kind of like disconnect of like, well, if you are going there, it means that there's something wrong. And it's just recently that mental health, issues, challenges have been kind of been brought up a little bit more up at the forefront. But in general, it's been something that has been kind of like hidden. And I think it's all of those things. So for example, you dealing with your you as the adult dealing with your own things that are not going well in your life, or things that you feel have been passed on to you. It's a good example to your kids that, well, you know what? If I need help, I go and get the help. I don't wait for it to kind of like sit through with myself and make myself even more ill, if I can say it in that way, or
Sure.
even unwell, um, because I'm scared of what people will think, of what that will
Well,
think.
I have heard so many stories of children coming to their mothers and talking about being sexually abused,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
their mothers not believing them,
yeah.
or not want really. I think it was easier just not to believe them.
Believe
They
them.
just didn't want to believe them, because then they would have to make changes within their own life.
Yes.
And I've just been baffled every time I hear that concept. It's just baffling, because I just think about my own precious children. If they came to me and needed help in that level of helplessness, to be so invested in denial,
Yeah.
or not dealing with the problem, or not getting help, or everything having to be perfect, that, and I say that, and I'm sure there's things I've missed in my own kid's life, not to that extreme level, but I don't want to appear better than everyone else, or like I don't ever make mistakes and everyone else does, because I hate that type of personality and never want to
No,
be that.
no, but no one is perfect. That's for sure. But I think um, if I was to mirror what you've just said around my life, I feel that I'm a little bit more aware of what's happening in my
Yes.
children's life, in terms of like who they're going to spend time with, even in the family unit. I'm not talking even of the outside, I'm talking even in the family unit. I remember in my time be going to this aunt or this uncle, or going to family members and spending time with them. I have to be honest with you, in my if I have to look, I've got three boys. If I have to look, my three boys haven't been to other people's house, or even in the family, if I've not been there, or their dad hasn't been there. We've always been there with them. And I think all of this, for me, it comes from me, maybe this feeling of like wanting to know what's happening, but also wanting to have like a kind of I wouldn't say, when you're like on your children are on surveillance 24/7. It's not that's not what I'm suggesting here. But what I'm saying is I feel like there's a little bit more transparency into the way they are, because I feel like they are as true as they can be with myself, and they are the same with everybody. So I have this ultimate, for me, I have this ultimate understanding that when they say something, it is what they said, because they don't have that kind of
Yeah.
you understand? So I've
Yes.
never said to them, well, you're going to this aunt, so you have to behave, or you know, those kind of like warnings that I would get when I was a child, like for example, and you will see things that you couldn't say, because if you had said these things, it was like, how dare you say this, you know? and
Oh,
I, and I think
absolutely.
and I think
Yeah.
it's exactly the same. Like when you think of, for example, those mothers who will say, no, it's not true. Is I think it's a kind of like defense mechanism as well. But at what extent? Can you imagine? At what extent to the teen, to this young child? So for their whole life, they've got to go through this thing where they're saying, well, I'm being accused for something, like I'm being accused that this has never happened when this has happened to me. And that's again a double, I don't know.
Double standard.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Not leading by example, because you talked about a defense mechanism, and our brains are really good at those, right?
Yeah.
We're just so good at, like, our egos, like, "Rah," or not dealing with problems. We have to build that muscle to start seeing those things, because um, the the idea that something major could be happening in our kid's life is something that we want to look into. And it could be also be a defense mechanism to say, well, my teen needs to work on themselves, but I'm great. Like,
Yeah.
there's no problems. There's no problems here. They obviously had the perfect parent. So why 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 don't they get it right? Do you feel like sometimes teens' behavior is a reflection on what's internally going on with the parent?
Um, okay, I think yes and no. So yes, in the terms of like obviously things that has been passed on. So I think one thing I didn't really mention is that in our genes, obviously in our genes, so when we are born, we are already passed down trauma. And the trauma can go, I think I was reading something, an article last time, and it was like up to 10 generations back. So you could be carrying traumas from your great, 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 grandmother. So this is already being passed on. But then there's the behavior that people take on. So, for example, it is really easy for an adult to say, well, this is how I've been taught, and this is how I'm going to carry on going, because that's the right way, and that's the only way, you know?
Uh-huh.
And then that means that there's no windows out there, there's nothing being open, there's no opening on anything else outside of what I feel is right. And
Well,
there, yeah, sorry, go
well,
on.
no, we are, and I want to have grace with our parents and previous generations to say they were not living in the information age. They actually did not have the information or knowledge that is so readily available to us.
Yes.
So, but for our own kids, let's throw open those windows. Let's throw open those options for them. Like, our parents didn't have it, because this isn't a conversation about blaming our parents
Oh no,
for,
no, 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 no,
right? I
no.
know you. Yeah. But or even, I mean, if you have adult children, sometimes these podcasts are hard. If someone has a 30 or 40-year-old child, and then they listen to this and think, well, I should have done this and this differently. It's like, well, that's not doing you any good to beat yourself up over that. What can you do differently now? What kind of healing can you um, model for your kids now?
No, no. And exactly what you said. So it's like so if you have multiple children, the first child, you always feel like you have to walk on eggshells, because you don't really know what to do. Even though people say, oh, you do this, but you want to be the one as the parent doing things properly. But then you realize when you have a second child, like, I did this and maybe this wasn't the right way, so I'm gonna do it this way. So we are always into this evolving cycle where we are changing and we are recognizing what is maybe serving us and what isn't in that
Mm-hmm.
way. But I think that for me, one thing that I realized a lot once since I've been doing coaching is people need to be true to themselves. So you need to be true to yourself and you need to acknowledge what's your real truth yourself before you can be able to maybe show the level of empathy or show the level of compassion to others and see what is happening out there. You need to understand you first. And that's a work that nobody, a few people talk about it, but it's not something that people go, well, I'm going on a course to get to know myself better. It's not something that is available that you can just click and get it. And I feel like this is something that is so important because knowing yourself will show you what are your boundaries, but will also show you what are the what you need to know more of. What is it you're lacking of?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we are not complete. We're always evolving, but I feel like certain things we can always go and try to find a better place for it.
So, what do you know from working with teens that most parents don't know?
I think what I know is, what I believe, what I believe is that every young people, um, they know what is right or wrong. They know it. Like you could have a young person that's got a challenging behavior and they've been labeled, if I can say it like that, as having
Sure.
the challenging. They know what they're doing is not right. They have this absolute truth in themselves that I'm not on the right path. And I think parents need to acknowledge that, instead of do sometimes the blaming, or the accusation, they need to acknowledge that, you know what, they probably know that this was not the best. How can I support in a different way so that they feel empowered and next time do what's right for them? Not about me or what the effect on me or anything, but what they will get from there. How can I empower them? So, for example, I'm part of a few groups where you see things like, I can't deal with my child, I'm going to tell them to go. And it's like, okay, so I've worked in places where young people are coming, which are like governmental places that they call like foyer or hostel for young people. And basically there, they are left to fence for themselves. And they are gonna go to the person that shows them the most, the kind of like, I feel what you're feeling. I know what you're doing. But there's not an actual truth, an actual, I would say, certainty of knowing if that person is coming with good intention or not.
Which, not that this is a conversation about
Yeah,
child abuse,
yeah,
but
well,
that's what you hear a
yeah,
lot of times when kids
yes,
are in trafficked
yeah,
or turned,
yeah,
gangs, drug dealers, whatever it is, that they use that
yes,
understanding. Your parents don't understand you, but I do.
I do.
Which, if your parents can understand you, that's quite the barrier.
Yeah. So
Do
then,
their best to understand you. Yeah.
exactly. So then what happens is that so the first reaction was like, you're not listening to me, you have to leave my house.
Mm-hmm.
So you think by leaving your house, they're gonna get to understand what you're talking about? Do you think that that's what's gonna bring more understanding within the family unit? And also, do you think that this is gonna empower your child
Mm-hmm.
in doing that? And I have to say, in from what I've seen and I've witnessed myself, I would say 95% are not being empowered by this kind of moves. 95%. And even I think I'm too generous, 98%. Yes. No, no, no,
So,
no. Like seriously, it's the same
mm,
thing when your child is like, let's say your daughter has got a boyfriend or a girlfriend, when she's in a relationship and you have this attitude of, well, oh, why are you doing this? Or what you're doing is you pushing them. You are not bringing them and you're not empowering them to be their best self into that relationship, because
yeah.
they're gonna go in and go like, well, all I'm hearing is blame, blame, blame here, so I'm gonna put my all into this.
Mm, mm. Well, Patience, thank you for this conversation. Where can people find more out about you?
Oh, they can find a little bit more about me at Otentik Mindset, which is my platform, where I have my website also, www.authenticmindset.com. And I have a few courses for young people around relationship and understanding money mindset and confidence, getting confidence, and building them to be the best self they can be.
Yeah. Well, we'll put those links in the show notes. And Patience, thank you for helping us and our teens learn to become toxic person proof.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.